Okay, so I am now beginning my third bread recipe of the afternoon, and it's one of my absolute favorites. It's rosemary olive oil bread, and it's a little bit more involved than the last two. Um, this Amish sweetbread and the Italian bread are really super simple. This one's a little bit more involved just simply because it's got a few more ingredients in it, as there's more seasonings and stuff inside the bread. But it starts out the same as all basically yeast breads. So I'm going to start out with I'm doing a double again. So it's 2 cups of warmish water, not hot, not cold, because your yeast won't act the right way. And then I'm going to do a tablespoon and a half of the yeast. Okay. And then 2 teaspoons. Oh, wait, is it? This one's going to be 2 tablespoons in this one. The sugar content kind of varies from recipe to recipe. So now I'm doing 2 tablespoons of sugar. And of course, like I told you in one of the other bread videos, the sugar in this process kind of helps the yeast to get going. So that's what we're going to do there. We're going to let that sit for 10 minutes. And a while ago, I went out to my greenhouse and I picked some of my rosemary. Currently, I have it in the greenhouse because we've still got one more freeze that I know of coming up in a couple of days. So I have all of those plants still inside the greenhouse. But I went ahead, I needed to trim one back anyway. So I went ahead and trimmed, and I've been picking the rosemary leaves off. And I use this, it's a coffee bean grinder, but I use it solely as my herb grinder. Works great. I don't have to use a mortar and pestle. So this works out pretty well. And I'm going to get these going in here and grind them up because I will need to, now I don't have to grind these to a powder, just basically chop them. So all I have to do is some light chopping in this thing. And you can use, there's lots of different choppers that you can use for this, but this is very handy and real useful and quick for me. Looks good to me. So that is what I will use to put into my rosemary bread. After the yeast is done proofing, then I will start adding all the ingredients together and getting it going, just like I did the other ones. And I'll show you the process. Okay, so on my rosemary olive oil bread, we are now to the point where the yeast has done its thing. It's all nice and foamy in there. And while it was foaming up, I went ahead and added together the ingredients kind of in a different bowl so that they're mixed together. What I did was I put 3 cups of flour in here, and then I added 4 tablespoons of fresh chopped up rosemary, a half a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, half a teaspoon of black pepper, and a teaspoon of salt. Went ahead, just whisked it together, and it already smells good. You can smell the seasonings already. But what I'm going to do now is add 4 tablespoons of olive oil to the mixture that I've got in here first. Tablespoons. Did I say teaspoons? I keep doing that. It's tablespoons. 4 tablespoons. All right. Okay. Now I'm going to start adding. There it is. I'm going to start adding the flour mixture with the seasonings that I've already put together into here. Just like as in the other recipes, just let it go a little at a time so that it can kind of all get mixed in there. It will require a little bit more flour than what's in here, but this is a for sure amount, and then the rest of it is based on what it looks like. If it's too sticky, we're going to continue adding more. Probably take another cup of flour. Of course, all of these recipes will end up on my Life on the Farm blog, but and as will the videos on in the blog. But I wanted to go ahead and get these going and up on YouTube for people who can't find bread at the store, like the rest of us, and who are really needing some bread. These honestly aren't difficult. They aren't hard to put together. A lot of people think, bread making, that looks like it's really involved. But honestly, it's just not. It sounds like if you look at the recipe, okay, you've got to put this together and let the yeast proof and whatever. But all that means is pour a few ingredients in, let it sit for 10 minutes. It's going to be okay. I promise it's a lot easier than what it sounds like. And this particular bread, even though it's a little bit more involved, oh my gosh, it's so worth it. It's so, so good. Go ahead and pull everything away from the sides. Get ready to add a little bit more. That's doing pretty well. Now that's going to have to knead once I've got all the flour in there that it's kneading, then it's going to have to knead for 5 to 10 minutes. I'll pay attention to what it looks like. And I can usually tell by the fact that as the dough hook is spinning it, once it gets close to the end, everything is pulling off the side. It's kind of forming into one big ball. We're still going to need a little bit more flour for this one. Oh, it's in there. If your dough, when you're getting it going, trying to decide how much flour to put in, if your dough is still looking like thick brownie batter, then you know that you still need more. If it's all really still stuck to the sides and the dough hook can't really pull it up, you definitely need more flour. Okay, so I'm going to let this go, and I'm going to get it kneading. Once it's done kneading, like the rest of them, I'm going to pull it out and put it into a greased bowl, put a little piece of plastic wrap over it with a hand towel over it, let it sit for an hour to rise. Then, once it's done rising, we will pull it out and form it into 2 loaves, to be like long loaves, like French bread, to be put on a cookie sheet, and we'll get that going, but I'll show you that process. Okay, so now I'm down to getting the Rosemary Olive Oil Bread handled, and it has done its first rise. It's nice and doubled. So now I'm going to punch it down and then pull it out and separate it into 2 loaves. You can see all those yummy herbs all in there. And I'm going to do the same thing on this as I do on the Italian bread. I'm going to pull it out, kind of stretch that upper side smooth into a seam on the back side. Pull it out to, I don't know, around 12 inches or so. And then, now, the way I prepared my pan this time is I always put some olive oil down, but then I also sprinkled some cornmeal down on the bottom. And I'm going to get this thing here set up, get the second one in there, do it the same way, pulling it out to about the same size. Okay. Now, they are ready for their second rise. Now, I'm going to cover them back up, and I'm going to let them sit for another 45 minutes, actually, and let them get their second rise. At the end of their second rise, I'm going to make those little slices in the top of it like I do the Italian bread, if you saw that video. And then I'm going to stick them in the oven and let them go. I hear the beeping. I've got my Italian bread coming out right now. You guys will be able to see those videos, the Amish sweetbread, the Italian bread, and then the Rosemary Olive Oil Bread. And hopefully sometime tonight we'll have those up and ready. And then I've got to go ahead and get going on supper. I believe I may video this too. Something cool to see. And if you haven't done it before, I'm making homemade chicken strips, which my family just loves. And then I'm also making some fried squash from my garden last year that I had in the freezer. And then also fried okra. My family's going to be very